The story of the young grandmother. Her name was Lydia. Long ago, in a small village at the foot of the mountains, she was only 20. No one could have guessed that this young woman would one day become a grandmother, not only to her own children and grandchildren, but to entire generations of people she would never give birth to. On the night of her wedding, a star fell from the sky. The elders said it was a sign of a long destiny, but no one understood how long. 100 years passed. Her hair remained black, her eyes still glowed with youth, and her hands were as soft as a girl's. Yet she buried her children, and later her grandchildren, her heart cracking with grief each time. She slowly realized that something was happening to her that no words could explain. People stopped calling her by her name. To them she became the young grandmother, the one who knew everything about life and death, the one who had seen kingdoms rise and fall, the one who remembered languages that no longer existed. Her body never aged, but her soul grew lined with wrinkles. Inside her lived thousands of voices, the voices of those she had loved and lost. Sometimes children from new generations would come to her and ask, "Grandmother, why don't you grow old?" She would smile and answer, "I age on the inside. I keep time for you." By the time she reached 400 years, her house stood on the ruins of her first village. The world had changed completely, of cities of glass and fire, machines that flew, people who had forgotten their roots. And yet, they still came to her. They came for advice, for comfort, for a word. And one evening, sitting on her porch, she whispered, "Perhaps my curse is also my gift. I remain young to remember that everything alive must one day pass. And I am the keeper of their memory." At that moment, as a new sun rose over the horizon, she felt thousands of hands, the hands of her children, her grandchildren, and their children embracing her. And for the first time in 400 years, she knew she was not alone. The young grandmother, the second chapter. Lydia thought her path was only to remember. For centuries she carried the weight of others' lives, believing her own was merely a vessel for memory. But when the world crossed into its fifth age, when the sky filled with towers of light, and men reached the stars, as she discovered that time had hidden another secret for her. One night, as she walked through the ruins of her old village, she found a stone she had never seen before. It pulsed faintly, like a heart. When she touched it, she felt a warmth so deep it shook her bones. Voices rose inside her mind, and not just the voices of the dead she had known, but of thousands she had never met. Farmers, warriors, poets, children, all whispering one truth: you are not only memory, you are the bridge. From that night, Lydia began to dream differently. She no longer only remembered, she began to see forward. Dreams of people yet unborn, of cities that would one day rise, of storms that would come. She understood then that she was not cursed. She had been chosen to walk between what was gone and what had not yet arrived. The world began to fear her. Some called her a prophet, others a ghost. Governments sought her out, demanding her visions. Pilgrims knelt at her doorstep. She grew weary, for she never asked to guide anyone. And yet, whenever she thought of refusing them, she saw the faces of her lost children in the crowd, and she could not turn them away. One evening, a young girl no older than Lydia had once been, came to her and asked, "Grandmother, if you can see the future, does that mean you know when your own end will come?" Lydia smiled, and for the first time in centuries, a tear slid down her cheek. "My child," she whispered, "perhaps my end is not death. Perhaps my end is when the world no longer needs me to carry its time." And so she walked on, carrying centuries behind her and centuries ahead of her, a solitary traveler of ages, young in body, ancient in soul. But in the deepest part of her heart, she wondered, when the last memory fades, and the last dream comes true, will she finally be allowed to rest? The young grandmother, the third chapter. Centuries had carved silence into Lydia's heart, yet the question of her existence never left her. Why her? Why this life without end? One night, as the world prepared to celebrate its 1000th year since the birth of a new era, Lydia followed a call only she could hear. It was not the voice of memory, nor the whisper of the future, but something older, something woven into the fabric of time itself. The call led her back to the mountains where she was born, long since swallowed by forests and forgotten by maps. At the highest peak, beneath a sky of stars that seemed to bow toward her, she found the place where the falling star had landed 400 years ago. There, resting in the stone like an ember still burning, was a shard of light. It pulsed with the same rhythm as her own heart. And then she understood. The star had not fallen by chance. It had chosen her. The shard spoke without words, filling her with truth. You are not cursed. You are a keeper of the thread. Time weaves, time breaks, and you mend it. Where others pass, you endure, so that memory never dies, and the future never loses its root. Tears burned in her eyes. For centuries she had believed herself to be alone, carrying a burden no human should bear. Now she knew, she was not a prisoner of time, she was its guardian. And yet, the shard offered her a choice. She could place it back into the earth, and her life would finally end as any mortal's, should her soul joining her children at last. Or she could carry it within her forever, walking the endless road, never resting, but always guiding. For the first time in 400 years, Lydia trembled. She was both young and old, weary and strong. She longed for rest, yet she feared what the world might become without her. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness she saw every face she had ever loved and every face yet unborn. Both reaching out to her, both asking her to choose. And when she opened her eyes, the shard of the star glowed brighter, as though it already knew her answer. The young grandmother of the 4th chapter. Lydia stood on the mountain peak, the shard of the fallen star burning in her hand. Round her, the night was utterly still, as though the world itself held its breath, waiting for her decision. If she let the light return to the earth, her body would finally yield to time. She would become dust, and at last, she would walk among the souls she had mourned for centuries. Her children, her grandchildren, her people. If she kept it, she would live on, and not as a woman, but as a bridge between ages. Her smile would comfort the lost, her visions would guide the wandering, her memory would preserve what the world would otherwise forget. She whispered to the shard, "Why me? Why was I chosen?" The light pulsed once, gently, like the heartbeat of a child. In that moment she realized the truth. It was not because she was extraordinary. It was because she was ordinary, the simple soul with enough love to carry centuries, and enough strength to endure their weight. Her tears fell on the stone, and for the first time in 400 years, she allowed herself to weep freely. At dawn, when the first light touched the mountain, Lydia pressed the shard to her chest. Her body trembled, then stilled. The glow sank into her heart, vanishing within her. She had chosen to remain, not for herself, but for those who would come after. When she descended from the mountain, her face was calm, her eyes ageless. She was no longer only the young grandmother. She was now the keeper of time. And though she carried loneliness like a shadow, she also carried something greater, the quiet, unshakable knowledge that every soul, the past, present, and future, would find its way through her. But in the secret chamber of her heart, one question remained. Would the day ever come when even a keeper was allowed to rest? The young grandmother, the 5th chapter. For centuries, Lydia had walked the earth alone, her secret hidden within her chest like a silent flame. Cities rose and crumbled, languages blossomed and faded, empires dreamed and collapsed, and still she endured. She thought herself the only keeper, bound forever to solitude. But the world, as it often does, held one more secret. It happened on a night heavy with storms. Lydia had wandered into a city of steel and glass, where people no longer looked at the stars. As the rain poured, she felt it again, that pulse, like her own heartbeat, but not from within her. It was near. She followed the rhythm through empty streets until she saw him, a tall man with silver hair, standing beneath a broken clock tower. In his hand, faintly glowing, was a shard like hers. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the centuries between them collapsed. "You," she whispered. "I've been searching for you," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the same weight she had borne, endless years of memory, of sorrow, of love lost and reborn in strangers' faces. Lydia trembled. For 400 years she believed she was the only bridge between ages, the lone guardian of time's thread. And now, before her, stood another. "Who are you?" she asked. He smiled softly, as though the answer was too vast for words. "I am as you are, a keeper. Though I was given my shard under a different sky." The storm raged above them, lightning tearing the heavens, yet Lydia felt a strange peace. For the first time in eternity, she was not alone. But with that peace came a new fear. If there were keepers, how many more? And why had time chosen them? As the rain fell, the man extended his hand. "Our paths were never meant to be solitary," he said. "The threads of time are fraying. One keeper cannot hold them alone." Lydia looked at his hand, then at the glowing shard within his palm. The stormlight caught her eyes, and in them burned both hope and dread. For deep inside, she knew this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of something far greater, the truth about the stars, about the very nature of time, and about the destiny of those who carried eternity in their hearts. The young grandmother, the 6th chapter. The storm passed, but in Lydia's chest the thunder still echoed. She walked beside the silver-haired keeper through the city's sleeping streets, her mind spinning with questions she had carried for centuries. At last she asked, "Why were we chosen? What is it we are truly meant to guard?" The man looked up at the night sky, where clouds parted and the stars shone, each one steady and eternal. But Lydia now saw them differently, not distant fires, but eyes watching, waiting. "The stars do not fall by accident," he said quietly. "Each shard that reaches the earth is a fragment of time itself. When threads of the world fray, when memory and future risk unraveling, the stars send down their hearts. And those who touch them become what we are." Lydia's breath caught. "So there are others?" "Yes," he nodded. "Scattered across ages, hidden in forgotten corners of the world. Some guard memory, some guard dreams, some have fallen into silence." His last words carried sorrow, and Lydia suddenly understood eternity was not only a gift but a trial. Some keepers had not endured. Some had let their flames burn out. They stopped at the edge of the city, where the ruined clock tower loomed above them, frozen at midnight. The man reached into his cloak and showed her a map not of lands, but of stars, their lines connected like veins of light. "This is our true work," he said. "The stars fall because time itself is wounded. If the wounds deepen, the world will collapse into stillness. All life, all memory, will fade. We are not here simply to endure. We are here to weave the broken threads back together." Lydia felt her chest tighten. For centuries she had believed her purpose was to remember, to comfort, to stand as a silent witness. Now she saw she was part of something far greater, a living tapestry that bound past and future. Her hand brushed against her shard, still glowing faintly beneath her skin. "And if we fail?" she asked. The man's eyes, silver as moonlight, met hers. "Then time itself will end. Not with fire, not with darkness, but with silence." Lydia stood very still. For the first time in 400 years, her immortality did not feel like a curse, nor a burden. It felt like a responsibility. She lifted her gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, others like her waited. Others who carried the light. And deep inside, Lydia felt the truth rise like dawn. Her journey was only beginning. The young grandmother, of the 7th chapter, Lydia, and the silver-haired keeper, whose name she learned was Kale, left the city before dawn. The map of stars guided them, each glowing thread pointing toward others like themselves. But not all lights were steady. Some flickered. Some had already gone dark. As they walked, Kale explained, not every keeper chose to remain faithful to the shard. Some grew weary of centuries. Some twisted their gift. "The shard does not command us. It reflects what we carry inside." Lydia's heart tightened. She remembered the weight of loneliness, the nights when she wished for death, when her soul nearly broke. What if I, too, had fallen into that darkness? Their journey took them to a forest untouched by time. In its heart stood ruins older than memory, where shadows clung to the stones like living things. There, they felt it, the pulse of a shard, but heavy, corrupted, as if the star's light had been poisoned. From the ruins emerged a woman cloaked in black, her eyes gleaming like obsidian. In her chest burned a shard, but its glow was not gentle. It seethed, fractured, bleeding smoke into the air. "I know you," she said, her voice like ash. "The young grandmother. The faithful one. The obedient one." Lydia froze. "Who are you?" The woman's lips curved into something that was not a smile. "I was once like you. I bore my shard with hope. But hope rots when centuries pass. Love dies. Children turn to dust. And still we walk. Why cling to a world that only forgets us?" Kale stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of a blade that shimmered faintly with starlight. "You surrendered to despair, Celine," he said. "You let your shard feed on your grief instead of your love." Celine's laughter cracked the silence of the ruins. "Love. Love is the first lie time teaches us. The stars chained us, and I broke free. I no longer weave threads, I cut them." The air grew colder, and Lydia felt the weight of centuries pressing on her chest. She saw in Celine what she might have become if she had chosen differently, if she had let sorrow consume her. Celine raised her hand, and shadows stirred like serpents around her. "Come, young grandmother. Let me show you the truth of eternity." The forest seemed to hold its breath. The light of the stars above trembled. Lydia's shard throbbed against her heart, as though warning her, this was not just a battle of strength, but of will. And for the first time in 400 years, Lydia understood being a keeper meant more than memory and prophecy. It meant choosing, again and again, between the light and the dark inside herself, The young grandmother of the 8th chapter. The forest was silent, the ruins heavy with the weight of forgotten centuries. The air shimmered with the pull of shards, 3 flames of eternity beating against each other, Lydia's gentle glow, Cale's steady silver light, and Celine's fractured darkness. Celine spread her hands, and the shadows surged like a tide, twisting into forms that looked almost human of faces of the dead, mouths open in endless cries. They swarmed toward Lydia and Cale, their touch colder than ice. "Do you see?" Celine's voice was both fury and sorrow. "They never leave us. The past feeds on us until we break. You call it memory. I call it chains." Cale's blade shone, cutting through the shadows, each strike like a falling star. But for everyone he destroyed, 2 more rose. His breath grew ragged, and his shard pulsed in warning. Lydia stood frozen at first, her chest heavy with grief. The shadows looked like her children, her grandchildren, all the faces she had buried. They reached for her with hands of smoke, whispering her name. Her knees weakened. What if Celine was right? What if all these centuries had been nothing but chains? Then Lydia heard another sound, not the whispers of shadows, but the memory of laughter. The laughter of her daughter as a child. The songs her grandchildren sang at night. The countless lives she had touched, comforted, guided. They were gone. Yes, but they had lived, and that was enough. She pressed her hand against the shard in her chest, and it flared like dawn. The shadows recoiled, hissing. Celine's eyes widened in fury. "You still cling to illusions," she spat. Lydia stepped forward, her voice steady though her heart trembled. "They are not illusions. They are the threads. Grief is not the only thing eternity gives us, it gives us love that outlives time." Her shard blazed, not with fire, but with warmth, a light that did not burn but healed. The shadows around her dissolved, their faces softening before fading into the air like smoke released from a flame. Cale, renewed by her strength, raised his blade. Together, their lights pushed back Celine's darkness until the ruins shook. The corrupted shard in her chest cracked, a sound like shattering glass echoing through the forest. Celine staggered, fury and despair twisting her face. "You cannot hold the threads forever," she whispered. "The stars will fall, and you will break as I did." With a cry that was half scream, half sob, she vanished into the shadows, leaving only silence and the echo of her warning. Lydia stood trembling, the glow of her shard dimming back to its steady heartbeat. Cale touched her shoulder, his eyes grave. "She is not gone, and she is not the only one. There are others who chose the dark, and one day we will have to face them all." Lydia looked up at the stars. They no longer seemed distant, they seemed watchful, waiting. For the first time, she felt the weight of not just memory, but destiny. The War of the Keepers had begun. The young grandmother, the 9th chapter. After the battle in the ruins, the forest grew quiet again, but Lydia knew peace was only an illusion. Celine's words clung to her heart like thorns. "You cannot hold the threads forever." She and Cale left the forest at dawn. The map of stars burned faintly in his hands, its glowing lines shifting, pointing toward distant places. Some lights shone steady, but others flickered weakly, as if the keepers there were struggling or fading. "We must find them," Cale said. "One shard is strong. 2 are stronger. But if Celine is right, if others have turned to darkness, then we will not survive alone." Lydia nodded. She felt the truth in his words. For 400 years she had carried her shard in silence, believing herself a lone witness. But the world was changing, threads unraveling faster than ever. The storm they had faced was only the beginning. Their journey took them across deserts where the sand sang in the wind, through cities where towers pierced the clouds, and along coasts where the sea glowed with strange blue fire at night. Everywhere they went, Lydia felt the shards calling, faint pulses beneath the skin of the world. The first they found was a boy, no older than 17, in a village carved into stone cliffs. His shard glimmered in his throat like a star caught in breath. He had not yet learned what it meant, only that he dreamed of lives that were not his own. The second was a woman blind from birth, who heard the voices of time in the rustle of leaves and the echo of rivers. Her shard shone in her palms, glowing whenever she touched another living being. With each keeper they found, Lydia's heart grew lighter. For the first time, she felt something she had not felt in centuries, a family. Not bound by blood, but by the endless thread of time. Yet the map of stars also showed them places where light had gone out entirely. Cold voids where once a shard had burned. One night, as the new circle of keepers sat beneath the sky, the boy asked Lydia, "Grandmother, what happens when a shard dies?" The question made the air heavy. Kale's jaw tightened, but it was Lydia who answered. Her voice was low, her eyes distant. When a shard dies, it does not vanish. Its light returns to the stars. But the Keeper, she paused, her chest aching. The Keeper's soul is trapped in silence, unable to join the past or future. Neither remembered nor dreamed. The boy shivered. The blind woman reached for his hand. And Lydia, staring at the stars, whispered to herself a vow. No more lights will fall to silence. Not while I still walk. But in the darkness above, one star flared suddenly, and then burned out. The Keepers lifted their eyes, and in their hearts they knew, somewhere in the world, another shard had just fallen, but not into hands of light. The war of the Keepers had already begun to spread. The young grandmother, the final chapter. Centuries had passed, and Lydia, the young grandmother, had walked the world as a keeper of time. She had seen empires rise and fall, had guided lost souls, and had faced darkness in forms she could never have imagined. But now, for the first time, she felt the pull of her own end. The world had changed. Cities of glass had crumbled into forests, oceans had shifted, stars had moved in the sky. Her companions, the Keepers she had found, were scattered across distant lands, carrying the light forward. And Kale, who had walked beside her for countless years, now stood silent, sensing the same inevitable truth. Lydia sat beneath a lone tree, its roots twisting into the earth like veins. Her shard, the gift of the fallen star, glowed softly beneath her heart. She placed her hands over it and felt the pulse slowing, the heartbeat finally preparing to rest. Memories rose within her, the faces of her children, her grandchildren, the friends she had guided, and the Keepers she had saved. Every joy, every sorrow, every life she had touched had all washed over her in a tide of light. She smiled, tears running down her cheeks. A soft wind stirred the leaves. It carried whispers of the past and promises of the future. Lydia whispered back, I've kept the thread. I've held the time. Now let me go. The shard beneath her chest flared one last time, brighter than 1,000 suns, and then dissolved into starlight. Her body, young and vibrant for centuries, softened, and her breath slowed. For the first time, she felt the weight of eternity lift from her shoulders. Kale knelt beside her, holding her hand. You carried everything, he said softly. Thank you. Lydia's eyes closed, and a smile lingered on her lips. She no longer felt sorrow, no longer felt loneliness. She felt only peace. Her essence, her memory, her love, became one with the stars themselves, scattered across the heavens to guide the world silently. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the world seemed to sigh. The young grandmother, who had walked for 100 years through grief, hope, and endless nights, had finally found rest. Somewhere in the skies above, a new star flickered into being, and those who looked up, unaware of the gift, felt a strange warmth in their hearts, as if an unseen hand was watching over them, whispering, I was here, and I never forgot. Her story had ended, but her light, her memory, would remain forever.